CEO Lounge. Today's topic for discussion is future-proofing your organization. The ongoing coronavirus pandemic is a once-in-a-lifetime crisis for most businesses. Historically, the barometer used to judge a successful business has been the traditional financial indicators: gross, net revenue, operating profit, earning per share, etc., and others which signal the overall performance and health of a business. And they still are. But COVID-19 outbreak has unsettled the day-to-day operations and growth plans. There is an uncertainty. It is said that every challenge brings an opportunity with it. We all might be wondering what the world post-COVID-19 looks like. With social distancing being order of the day, countries across the world have started economic distancing from China. Does India have an opportunity? In my regular conversation with multiple leaders, they all state that beyond the economics, to maintain momentum and drive success, even in challenging times, businesses must stick to core principles, stay focused on core business and strengths, maintain brand culture, and have a proactive approach and readiness for future in the post-COVID period. Fortunately for us, this disaster has hit us during the digital age, which is all about connectivity, allowing businesses to interact with customers online, maintain customer relationship, and future-proof their businesses. Businesses across sector will continue to feel the aftershock of the lockdown even months after it has been lifted. And CEO Lounge today have called upon India's few finest leaders to tell us how to steer businesses through these trying times and how future should be looked to make the business future-proof. Is future-proofing about what might happen in the next 3 to 5 years, or should we look at the future 10 to 15 years from now? Does a future-proof strategy prepares companies to disrupt themselves, and are we ready to get disrupted? And what are the few practical ways you can take advantage of this unexpected opportunity and come out ahead of an otherwise unfortunate situation? And our panel today have inspirational, strong, and expressive leaders. We have VS Parthasarathy, Group Executive Council member at Mahindra Group. He heads the mobility sector as well. We have Romal, Shetty, the President Consulting at Deloitte, and Vivek, Gambhir, Managing Director and CEO at Godrej Consumer Products. And we also have a thought leader and a CXO suite coach, someone who started as a career as a bureaucrat and then in a corporate management and a CHRO for companies like Tata, Dr. Reddy, Cipla, Reliance, Prabir Jha to moderate this discussion. I'm expecting an extremely engaging conversation. What is common between all our panelists and Prabir today that they're writers, So you can't miss out Vivek's blog every day, every Monday in the morning called 8 a.m. Prabir is a Kavi, he writes Kavitai. Partha is a Shair, he writes Shairi, and I'm not going to end this conversation without Prabir and Partha showing what they really do with the Kavita and Shairi. And of course, Romal Shetty, who has actually been advising CEOs and C-suite leaders how to run their companies. So ladies and gentlemen, be ready for a very engaging and enlightening conversation. Prabir, over to you.
All right, Deepak. I don't know whether my audio is a problem. I missed a fair bit of your audio. I hope I am okay. So Partha says yes, and okay, Vivek is able to hear, Romal is able to hear. So I actually have had a problem listening into you, but thank you very much for inviting me to help moderate this. This is going to be an exciting conversation, and it can't be a better panel to be chatting with. The entire issue of today is really about looking forward, but it's not as easy as we all think. And we have between Vivek, Partha, Romal, people who actually are in the core of running businesses. Thankfully, the last 1 year, I've been seeing it from the sides. And so it's good to have an independent view when I'm not operationally neck deep. But I think I want to really start this afternoon conversation, Vivek, with you. You run a fairly complex and big piece of business something which is touching lives of people also in the crisis that we are in today. But my question to you is, sitting at where you sit as the CEO of a large company, how do you actually see companies like yours or others respond to the near-term operational challenges and the near-term risks, right? We are in the midst of the crisis. So how do you see that happening? What is working well? And what are possibly some of the top of the mind struggles that you typically either experience or you hear from fellow CEOs? Vivek.
Thank you very much, Prabir and Deepak. It's a pleasure to be part of this panel. And I hope that everyone's families are safe and healthy. You know, in the late 1930s, there was an aviator by the name of Douglas Corrigan. And Corrigan at that time had submitted a plan to basically fly from Brooklyn to California. His subsequent 29-hour flight actually landed in Dublin, Ireland. And July 19th, 1938, there was a big headline in the newspapers which says, Corrigan flies by the seat of his pants, right? Which basically meant that while he was flying, there were very few navigational aids available, and he ended up flying through using his judgment. And honestly, that's what the last few weeks have looked like. This crisis is unprecedented. There is no playbook. And however hard we can pretend to try and find the answers, honestly, most of us are really flying by the seat of our pants. What I've seen is an amazing level of creativity, some tremendous agility, and some fantastic collaboration. But what the last few weeks has really been, it's been about jugaad, and it's been about a certain amount of ad hocism. The reason is the lockdown came completely unannounced. The lockdown was completely unplanned. And one can arguably say it was extremely poorly executed. So every single business had to desperately find ways to make sense of the situation. And what's been difficult is that the guidelines have been changing on a daily basis. Just think about the number of new rules that have been put into place. Beyond these guidelines, the local implementation, the local translation on the ground has just been a big, big challenge for almost all the companies. So what we basically did was we said, let's adopt a three-pronged approach. Number one, let's ensure that our employees are safe and healthy. Number two, wherever possible, when we manufacture essential products, let's try and see if we can improve the supply of our essential products. And number three, this is beyond us, a public health, humanitarian, and an economic crisis. So what can we do to start playing a meaningful impact in our communities? What we then did was basically adopted a three-pronged approach. We called it restart, recover, and retool. Restart was all about trying to get our business back on track, ensuring safety, and trying to at least get some semblance of supply chain operations. The second part of it is recover. So as the business starts recovering, how can we ramp up supply chain operations? How can we ramp up distribution? How can we start getting our employees back to work? And also look at tactical innovations. The third part is retool. We recognize that this crisis in many ways will give us some tremendous opportunities to be able to deal with the new normal. So how will consumer behaviors and attitudes change? What will the future supply chain look like? What will future distribution look like? How do we adapt and innovate to new ways of working? So I think, Prabir, in many ways, this is a work in process. I think operationally, we have done a few things well, but it's largely been driven by the agility and passion of our team members on the ground. But honestly, it has been much more about flying by the seat of our pants approach.
You are on mute.
That's a great start. Although I think I have some issues with my internet speed or the audio. I have been patchy, so apologies for that. But you know, I think it's a great start. And Partha, I want to come next to you. And you know, you are again part of a big conglomerate, and while we battle the crisis, while we battle the here and now, and Vivek was giving a sense of really some of the near-term challenges, how do you think companies can plan for a better turnaround? Because this crisis will continue in some shape and size for some time. So how do you think that companies could be thinking of a sharper turnaround? And if you were to advise the CXOs of different companies, what should be the top 3 priorities that they should collectively think and own? That perspective would be very useful. So Partha, all yours.
Thank you, Prabir, and I hope I'm audible. Yeah, okay. So I can see that, and I think Vivek gave a very nice way to kind of start this off by saying that we are dealing with an unknown. It's therefore if you were to say I have a playbook and you should do this, then it will not be quite the right way to look at it. The key thing is that you got to engage with this whole aspect and then try to look outward and look at scenarios. So in a sense, I would like to, first of all, say hello to all our viewers and also tell them that look at mine in relative terms and not absolute, whatever I say. And therefore apply that in that context to each, because each one of us are like the people experiencing the elephant. And if we are all blind and we are experiencing the elephant, it will seem very different parts, will seem different things to different people. So keep that in mind even as I kind of try to answer, because Mr. Prabir asked the question, I can't not answer it. So I'll give my views on this. So Vivek, like you, let me start with a slogan. I said, I think we should look at it in 3 forms. Whenever a crisis hits you, how do you respond or react is the first one. The second one is how do you respond to the ecosystem? How do you think about it? And third is how do you renew yourself? And that's what you are talking about. How do I come back better than what I started off? So I think I'll give these 3 as a way. If anybody wants to do a faster turnaround, they can look at it in terms of how do you react, how do you respond, how do you renew. So the first aspect that I have to worry about is my ecosystem. Okay, I stopped talking about cash because cash is king, and you'll all say, first is make sure you don't run out of cash. As a CFO, that was the thing I kind of said till my voice was hoarse. And now it's not even a king, cash, it's an emperor. But if you were to look at protecting value chain, that's the first reaction that we must have. Because if we don't protect our value chain, the recovery time may come and you find that you are in an island, you are okay, but your ecosystem is not okay. And then how do you restart the engine faster? So therefore, the first thing I would say is how do you protect your value chain? And each one of us must decide what our value chain is, which are the people who are most impacted, and then how do we partner these people? So one is, I'll just give an example. Mahindra First Choice Wheels, which has got franchisees out there for used car. We had a town hall with all the dealers and put them a 10-point program of how we can help them during this time. It's very important. Those people, dealers outside there, sitting there, will be feeling very alone and not knowing how to respond alone. But the moment we form a chain that we are together, then it can be much bigger. The second one is, when the lockdown is there, think of how we will quickly upturn. So that means we oiled all the machinery. Have you done all the things which needs to be done so that, it's like our car. We go once a week and tune it up, right? Even though we are not driving it now. How do I tune my company's engine every week, periodically, so that when I start to open, then it opens faster. And now I don't have a dead battery. So I have to get somebody to jump start it before I can drive. Yeah. So this is the second thing I would suggest to anybody. And third is that everyone should come together, which is robust and ready for the economy pickup. So read the news, connect periodically to see what the new thing brings. Because if the government gives a plan, then it has a set of reaction which it sets in. How do we take advantage of that reaction? How do we come on top? So this is the first part. The second part is that the organization must learn from this. And in future, must tackle the unknown unknowns better. But we tackle unknown unknowns not by saying this is how in future we will tackle it, but by changing our thing to saying we know how to adapt. Prabir, if I'm going to write a book soon and that book's title will not be built to last, the title of the book will be built to adapt. So why built to adapt is because the future again will have a black swan event and we don't know what that event is, but we must know how to adapt to that one. So I was thinking about, for example, COVID-19 was never captured in any risk matrix, right? It just came up in everybody's risk matrix after the event has happened. Okay, we can be forgiven for reactionary adapting, but we must learn from this and therefore put it. So is there an SOP like a SWAT team? Any emergency come, here are the 10 people, here is how the business continuity will happen, here is how I will put in. So if you put this, so even while restarting, this same set of SWAT team can keep giving us input of how to do. So this is, I call the A team, which will help us start faster and start better. The third part is that I think, and that's the most important to my mind, every crisis gives opportunity. Have you put a separate team called the B team out there? I called A does A and B does B. This is some famous book and writer who has given this slogan, right? And Prabir, you are HR, so you must know this, okay? So this B does B, if you put, have you put a team which is only looking at how do we come out of this better? What is the new adaptation? Take, for example, TVS. They say, I'm going to do 75% from home year after, even after the crisis is gone. So is this giving them a new cost paradigm, new business model paradigm? And therefore, that is the third part that one needs to look at. And therefore, I would say, look at bringing new business model, look at how will we be digitally be more savvy. And this team has nothing to do with the day-to-day operation. Take them out, put them separately and tell them to bring out this stuff. If we do these three measures, I think we should come out a little better when we come out of the priority. The next question you asked is 3 priorities for CXOs, okay? So that I don't keep talking for a very long time, because you have given me a blank canvas and I can paint for the next 45 minutes. But I would take a smaller bite at this, and maybe later if somebody wants to expand, I can do. I first say that cash flow, focus on cash flow. And your priority is don't run out of cash. If you run out of cash, all the other things won't matter for a thing. So again, even though it is often repeated, it's worth repeating. Cash is blood of any business. Cash is today emperor. Focus on it and work out the worst scenarios and work out and do. I've told people, withdraw money and keep it under your pillow. It's better than saying when you need it and go to the bank, you may find the bank is not lending you anymore. So be very clear about how your sources of money and manage cash flows for the next 6 months better. And assume the worst and plan for the best. The second is, it is very important to focus on employee. The business will be focused on by the employees, provided you focus on the business. So for one thing, if you have to do, focus on your employees' well-being. And I think they are very scared. They may be very unsure of the future. And therefore, you must focus on them and do many things, not just do, exercises and IT training, but give them this, best innovation can you bring about? B does B, form teams in each place of B does B and say, what are the new ideas you can bring about? And engage them so that every day their mind is not an empty mind. And it's a devil's workshop then, right? So, and the last one is community support, okay? Community support, I think, Prabir, you are trying to say something?
No, I was only trying to say that I'll come back on the employees bit separately with you in just a while, but please do continue.
Yeah, so I'll just finish in this. And community support. See, basically, we all talk about philosophy saying we are a great company, we do this and we do this for everything. This is the time to prove it. So therefore, how are you looking at community support? Your brand name will be remembered how you handle this crisis. Yeah, so therefore, look at community and look at what we stand up to our visions, we stand up to our missions. This is the time to showcase that in practical terms. Okay, and therefore that will be very important. So do that. I will add a fourth. Please ensure B does B. That's our salvation as we go forward. So this is the thing, and I'll stop here and say you
Okay.
asked me for 3 CXO things. I've given you 3 plus 1.
Very succinct. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And see how the black swan reality is hit. We did a trial run and the technology was working well. I was not able to listen to Vivek almost right through. I then switched from my laptop to my smartphone. So, you know, black swans happen. And on that note, Romal, this is for you. The question is for you. You know, COVID, it's an example, classic example of a black swan, and they do happen. And, you know, you've been in the consulting space, and the question that I have for you is, how do you have firms and institutions better simulate future scenarios from where we are and redraw their entire enterprise risk management thinking? Because obviously COVID was something no one had thought, planned. Is there a lesson, and what would your advice be to companies to look at their enterprise risk management approach now?
Sure. Good afternoon. Thanks, Prabir and Deepak, and of course, good afternoon to ladies and gentlemen. Hope all of you are doing safe. This is unprecedented. I mean, you know, we do simulations, we do all kinds of things in Deloitte. It's interesting, you know, I heard the framework, the different frameworks, and we have something called Respond, Recover, Thrive. Interesting, all of them sort of are similar in what they're doing. But the reason, when I come back to specifically this is one event that doesn't seem to have affected only one part of the business, right? It has affected business, economy, health, everything else. And what we're probably going to see is you're probably going to see countries becoming more isolationist. I think globalization is going to take an impact. You're going to see politics coming in between. This is also the year of elections, can have dramatic consequences. Right. So what we always say is you should do scenario planning, and you should really prepare and visualize. And when we used to do scenario planning, we typically looked at scenario planning from a perspective of, you know, our top management, really, right? Take the top management of a company, and they normally do scenario planning. Get in, of course, some other folks who are specialized in this, your risk management professionals. But what we've really seen is you got to get data scientists, you got to get epidemiologists, you got to get in different sets of people. You got to get in the youngest sets of people and really look after scenario to scenario. And what you can do is, you don't know what will happen, but what you can do is say, get into the nth level of different scenarios and prepare for each scenario. I think that is extremely critical. Second is challenge every orthodoxy possible. I mean, the old orthodoxy was, you have a business continuity plan, you know, you have another location site, you'll get it done. Whoever thought that the whole world is going to be non-functional, right? So, you know, challenge every specific orthodoxy as such. Also, I think very important during the simulation is to look at the fact that what are all the risks? Yes, absolutely. But also look at what are the risks to your competitors. Look at every risk from both your perspective, your country's perspective, your competitor's perspective, but look at it also from an opportunity perspective. There could be an opportunity because someone, and like, you know, I think Partha mentioned cash is king. We will see companies go belly up. We will see companies not able to sustain this. Is there obviously an opportunity then for a company to sort of step in? Because when the market shrinks, what you can only do is you can only increase your share of the wallet to still sustain. So one of the things that we're seeing as good practices, and as mentioned clearly, when we looked at Respond, Recover, and Thrive, the Thrive was really the other team which looked at a scenario which would happen 15 to 18 months and then onwards to say, how do you still continue in that scenario with all the constraints that you have now and change your business model completely. All right. So and a classic example, of course, you know, again mentioned, but what we are seeing with clients is, by virtualization and digitization, what can I do both in terms of changing my business model to become much more efficient, faster on the cloud using more AI, or for example, also saying simple things like real estate. Can I give 50% of my real estate space back? I mean, this is pretty common. Global corporations are doing it. Indian corporations are doing it. So yeah, that's what I would say is that's how, you know, people should prepare and simulate.
Great, Romal. Thank you. This is very good. I do pick this up. Respond, recover, thrive. Very interesting. Now the question is, how well and how quickly can one do that? Vivek, since I had a bit of a technology issue when you were making your comment, I do want to come back to you and I have a couple of questions for you. One is flowing from this comment that Romal made about change of business model. You know, I just am wondering that is the relevance of core of one's business still relevant? Is it still intact? Is it time for us to re-examine the so-called core of business? Will it possibly change given all that we are going through? Is there an opportunity or is that going to be a greater risk? So I'd like a comment on that. And if you could then connect with, especially in businesses like yours, which might be wanting to look at digital transformation at scale and therefore also building or rebuilding an internal capability with that. How do you think digital interventions are going to work in this, whatever is going to be the new core of business of companies like yours?
I think, Prabir, great questions. My personal belief is that the idea of a core actually becomes even more important, at times like this. Because ultimately, what is a core? The core is having a clear understanding of what drives value for a business and how does the business enable itself to actually serve its customers or consumers in ways others can't. So unless you really have a clear sense of what's distinctive about you, whether it's your business model, your principles, your values, your strategy, how else will you win in the marketplace? So at times like this, when there is so much confusion, there's so much ambiguity, the clarity and focus around knowing how you will drive value, how will you adapt, and what will you do differently to serve your consumers and your customers actually becomes more important. And this is one area where I find companies actually struggling the most. Because once you figure out what your core is, then you can decide, are there things perhaps that I should not be doing? So are there ways to slim down the core? Yeah. Are there new things that I need to start doing, right? Which might need to perhaps a new core or new capabilities around the core. So to me, at this stage, it's very important for people and companies to figure out what is truly strategic, what is non-strategic, for things that are non-strategic, advantage. Do you partner with some other people? Do you try and sell those assets? The second is what's productive, what's non-productive. Because every company of our size or other companies, there's a fair amount of unproductive work that goes on as well. Can you shed the unproductive part? And so I think the heart of this is to figure out what drives competitive advantage. I think once you've done that, then it's very important to figure out what your operating model needs to be, what your business model needs to be. While we're doing it, it's very important to not throw the baby out of the bathwater. I think I fully agree that cash needs to be the entire royal coat. But at the same time, I see a lot of companies running immediately to cut costs or let people go off. We've heard some horrible examples where 3,500 people were let go through a 3-minute video online. Is that what you want to be remembered as? Part of, I think, our job as leaders is to figure out how will we be remembered at after a few years. This is a once-in-a-lifetime crisis. We have to think about legacy building. We have to think about, future generations as well. And I think at times like this, values become very important. Values are so easy to live up to when things are going well. The true test of values comes in when things are not going well. So I think as we look at the core, a huge amount of the core rejuvenation actually is all about trying to figure out what your principles are and what your values are and what your value creation thesis needs to be. As part of the core, I think, transformation, we are now in the midst of a very exciting digital workshop that the entire world is going through. So I think digital will end up touching every single part of the enterprise. It is going to be about the customer. It is going to be about the supply chain. It is going to also be about the core in terms of some of our enabling functions. What I see is many companies looking at digital in a very siloed manner. This is a great time to be able to think about digital in a more integrated manner. I remember reading a cartoon which basically said, who drives the digital strategy? Is it the CEO? Is it the CIO? Or is it COVID? right?
True.
And the honest answer is it's COVID. For most of us, actually, COVID has given us a big kick in our pants on both the potential and the urgency to actually now think about digital in a much more integrated manner. And I'm sure people like Romal, who are experts at this, will be able to share far more deeper perspectives on how to think about a digital transformation.
Brilliant. This is wonderful. But just I want to steal one very sharp question. So what does it mean, therefore, for the shared economy, all these Airbnbs of the world, the Ubers of the world? Do you think their world will change? Will they get stronger? Will this directionally get to be a bigger thing, or will it shrink?
I think they will have to find ways to pivot in their model, right? And there is a short-term answer probably. There's a longer-term answer. And honestly, Prabir, we don't know what the long-term will look like because some of these trends we've never seen before. But over the next 1 or 2 years, we know travel, tourism, entertainment is going to take a very, very difficult knock. So do they have the cash position to sustain themselves? Can they pivot their model? I think a lot of questions are still there. But I think over time, the best performing companies who can pivot will find their own equilibrium. But the next 2 or 3 years, I think in those sectors is going to be very brutal.
Very, very fair. And I think this is all about new mindsets, ability to flex, ability to experiment. And Partha, therefore, I want to come back since you raised a question on employees and, on how you look at them. Do you think, given all that we are hearing from Romal and then we just heard from Vivek, is the employee upskilling going to look very different? Now, you were part of a big conglomerate, a fairly heterogeneous workforce. What do you think is really going to change? What is it going to be more the behavior, the disposition, the softer skills? Will it be a lot more of newer functional capability that might be sweeping, leveraged by digitization? And, you've also had a great background in finance. So will it really add up to financial resilience for a potential crisis that may come, who knows, sometime again in the future? Partha?
Second. Okay, sorry. It's a very, very interesting question. Thank you. The Zoom is very intuitive also. It says unmute. You are speaking without muting. So it told me it upskilled me. Okay. So, but basically a very interesting question, because now we need to kind of say that the new world, there will be some continuity from the old world. It is not as if, if you look at 1900 and you look at today, it's not as if things have, there is no commonality. There is some things common. And part of it is what Vivek referred to as values. What I said is, how do you deal with community? These things were there in 1900 and it is there today also. Okay. So there are things which will change and they'll not. So the key thing to say is, how do you upskill so that you are more relevant when you come out on the other side? Okay. And I think it's very important for us to kind of say that what is that you don't want to forget. You don't want to forget that you face the crisis. You don't want to forget that crises are here to come and we need to kind of do, but at the same time, we have to upskill on something. So I was kind of give you an example of how upskilling impacts people. And I will tell you about 1900 story, not today's story. In 1900, there was a photo taken of the New York Fifth Avenue. And all the entire thing was of horse carriages. And this is exactly 1900, not a single piece of car. There was one hidden away, and I generally present this photo and say, pick up the car in the lineup, okay? 13 years later, in 1913, same street, another photograph. And this time the question is to find the horse carriage, okay? So in 13 years, the world of Fifth Avenue changed by being only horse-driven carriage to this. I'm not in terms of technology here. I'm saying what skills were required in an automated car era versus an horse carriage era. What happened to all the drivers of the horses? Did they become drivers of the cars? And if so, how? And it's a very interesting thing to look. So and another thing in the current world, IT has changed dramatically, right? 10 years back or 7 years back, there was a question asked, will any of our IT companies in India survive because the whole thing is changed to digital, right? So, and we were services from India. So will it change? But you see now it is pivoting. We were still very much the, as an IT, now it is a digital capital rather than an IT capital. We have done some things well, we may need to do. So what is that we can learn? First thing we can learn is, this is all about adaptability. Okay. I have a finance academy, which as a CFO I ran, and I told that I don't want accountants anymore. I want PhDs and researchers. And you'll ask me why an accountant needs to know accountancy. Why does he know research and want to know to be PhD? And the only answer I had was that the future, the accountancy may be done by computer. So what are you going to do? You're going to give insights from that and inputs on top of that. And therefore, how do I make you adapt to the new future? So the new upskilling should be focused on thinking differently. Ability to what, I'll build on Romal, saying, how does everyone think of scenarios? And the beauty is the future, such backs and events may come even faster. If you think of the organizational CEO only will think of this, we are setting ourselves for failure. So if you are upskill for them to be able to think about scenario, so that there are millions of people thinking about that as it comes. So you equip the entire organization to deal with black swan event. We had, Anand Mahindra had given a slogan to us many, many years back called zero trauma. The zero trauma was not about the trauma will not happen. Avoid trauma, avoid any black swan event, avoid this. That's not up to you. How do you behave in such a manner? How do you create ecosystem and adaptability in such a manner that you are not struggling because of it? Many of them said you are fools because you have cash on your balance sheet, you should leverage.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of look back at them and say, okay, tell me now. Okay, but there's no right answer. Okay, so it's not a smug answer. I'm just saying we need to think about these kind of things and build capability and build zero trauma. That's the third one of upskilling. How do you build that zero trauma into the ecosystem? So how do people? And what the biggest thing is, if you can alone, make everybody, old one, old kahani is na Hindu banega, na Musalman banega, insan ki aulad hai, insan banega. The second line just changed, digital ki aulad hai, digital banega. So you now need to have a new digital child. Okay. So then that is what we need now in the new world. If our sons cannot be our mentors, we got something wrong.
Well said.
So we need to kind of do. And what should we focus on? Upskilling should focus on productivity, talent, hiring costs, cross-functional ability, and employee motivation. And if we can do this, I think we are ready as an organization. At least this crisis would have taught us something great of upskilling. Okay.
So well said, Partha. And you've touched a lot of things, and I wish we have another opportunity of exchanging views, because it will finally call out issues around leadership and culture that possibly many companies will need to reinvent, because you can't get to what you advise unless really from the top down, from the board down, the thinking is different. Romal, I'm going to come back to you, and again, want a very, very sharp perspective, advising clients from where you sit. How do you help both individuals and companies with this ability to look for opportunities in a world of constraints? Because there will be constraints, right? What typically comes in the way? Why do companies or leaders not think as smartly as some others do? And, are there really any quick common takeaways that our viewers could possibly benefit as tips to get to see opportunities in the face of the constraints that they are in, including the MSME segment? And, so anything that comes to your mind that companies don't do but should be doing?
Yeah, so thanks, Prabir. I think it's a great question. I mean, constraints are due to time, money, resources, abilities, choice, orthodoxies, right? I'll take maybe a few stories and real life example stories. We were told by the Orissa government that this is much before any other state government really reacted to say, can you help us on this whole COVID perspective, right? Which is whether to identify which areas it will explode, to identify somebody who could have symptoms without actually going to a doctor, to finally, looking at zones, doing geoperimeter fencing, to all of that. And, working with the state government, we've obviously worked for many years with state governments, but they're not the easiest to work with. It takes time. It takes a lot of time. And what we also realized is we had to bring in many different skills. So we actually, we got in Salesforce, we got in Google, we got in IIT Mumbai, we got in our Israel folks, because the doctors in Israel had basically identified a way to, identify people with symptoms. So they had these were specialists. And then of course, Deloitte US, because, they specifically bought in Salesforce skills as well. We put this whole platform integrated with WhatsApp in 7 days flat. Nobody stepped out of their house, right? And it basically was a 24-hour thing working across continents, right? But to build, normally if you had asked, hey, can you develop something like this? And we would have said, yeah, sure, 6 months, we'll do testing, we'll do, waterfall, we'll do all of that stuff. And we'll in 6 to 9 months, we'll roll it out. This was done in 7 days flat. Right?
Wow.
So one of the things is, and I think is a lot of it is to do with belief, and say that we can pull it off, and we can really, and constraints make you better rather than actually constraints forcing you to say this can't be done. Way back, long time back, and it's a story that I want to say that we used to do some work in Afghanistan. Now forget why we were doing that work in Afghanistan. We were doing for a telco story. It was about revenue optimization, maximization, really doing a lot of work on consumers, especially the telco consumers. And while doing the work, and this was not just a core technology job, because it was revenue maximization, strategy, product development, all of that stuff. Our hotel got attacked by the terrorists. You would have heard of this because this was a big news. They were basically trying to attack the Indian doctors who were actually in the hospital next to our hotel. And the terrorists actually came up to the first floor. We were on the third floor. They were neutralized with a lot of deaths. Now, we obviously couldn't do any work now in Afghanistan going forward, because obviously the team and everybody else was terrorized. But what we took as a challenge to say that doesn't matter, and this had never been done before, and I'm talking about 10 years back. This is not 3 years back, Black Swan, nothing. 10 years back, Afghanistan, of course, it was the common daily occurrence shootings. We were able to build a model, right, to actually service the client even without being there, but to do a strategy and operations, of course, with analytics, with technology, but really not being there at all. So I think some of that. And third is, companies have orthodoxies. Vivek can explain much better than me in terms of orthodoxy, but Starbucks, what was the orthodoxy? The earlier orthodoxy of a cafe shop was you come in and you go fast so that you have more consumers come in. They broke that orthodoxy to say that they wanted people to sit in the cafe for longer, right? So how do you break orthodoxy? So a lot of that is, I would say constraints of how you convert constraints into opportunities. What comes in the way was your question. And really a lot of it is to do with mindset. I think there is a specific mindset, and Partha made it very beautiful in terms of the question that our sons and our youngest employees, can they be reverse mentoring us? Right? Why can't they actually do that? Second is really lack of confidence. To Indian companies, I wouldn't say Indian, they're really multinational companies really, but world-class companies. We have in India lived with constraints far longer than the West has ever lived with. So innovation and ability in our country is far higher. So the reason should not be lack of confidence. We can probably do a lot. You take our scientists, you take everything else. The third biggest problem, what comes in the way, is fear of failure. There is this big fear of failure. If I do this, what happens? Will I lose my job? What will my seniors think? Whoever think, right? So those are really what comes in the way. And some tips I would say to deal is having a culture of fail fast and learn fast, right? Is it necessary for an auto engineer or a consumer specialist not to understand cloud? What is the necessity? Why shouldn't they understand cloud? Is cloud something only a technical thing? We spoke about most companies that are implementing cloud. If they go in for just the on-prem, off-prem kind of an environment, it's a waste of time. But if they can go to change the business model where they can deliver something contactless, touchless in a very short period of time, why not? You look at Tesla. Tesla is a classic combination of a software company and an auto company really coming together. It's really a software, more than just an auto company, right? So how do you sort of make some of that? Second is, how do you bring in a culture of innovation and culture of fearless. I think that's what leaders really should do. How do they ensure, and these are tough times, these are extraordinarily tough times. Vivek mentioned about it. What kind of legacies did you leave behind? How do you sort of motivate people to do something extraordinary? And I think that is what is really required. And, again, there are a lot of tidbits that came out as well, right? I mean, Mahindra's, for example, saying that how do you bring in innovation during this time? But that is very critical because you have to start looking at that. And third is, of course, incentivizing in a different way, in an extremely different way. Doesn't have to be a monetary award. It could just be gamification. It could just be having fun. But how do you sort of incentivize for people to move ahead, right, and move and try different things? So I think those were some quick comments from my side. I think you're on mute, Prabir.
Prabir, you're on mute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear.
Yes.
Great. So, no, these were very, very sharp hooks, Romal. Thank you so much for that. And this is really something which, at least from my point of view, I've been trying to talk to many companies or CEOs who've been chatting with me in the last some days. The more I think about it, and all of you have in different ways talked about orthodoxies, mindsets, innovation, think different, get comfortable with failure. It's really going to be a lot about leadership. It's going to be about a lot of role modeling. It's going to be about reinventing your own styles, flexing for the new world. Leaders will need a lot of support, coaching, right, to even manage teams which are going to be, in a digital world, spatially distributed. So there are lots of things which is going to impact culture, leadership, governance practices will possibly need to change. So I think some very, very interesting points. I have a set of questions which are coming in, and I'm cognizant that we have about 20-25 minutes to go. But before I open up and take some questions which are getting posted, I have a question which I want each of the three of you to respond. That in this kind of crisis, and all of you are in the thick of things, you're actually battling for your organization, solving problems. I'm sure there is some best practice that is getting created, because I believe that it is in moments of crisis that newer forms of leadership gets created, newer examples of success, newer ways of looking at business solutions get created. So I'm going to ask all three of you, one best practice that you have seen in the last 2 months as you've been observing, reading, which comes to your mind. What would that be? And what do you think is the best way of that getting embedded in a system? So one best practice that you have seen emerge, and what is the best way of embedding it? So in whichever order, maybe Vivek, we'll come to you, and then Partha, and then Romal.
Yeah. I think it's a great question, and Prabir, I would almost frame it as next practice as opposed to best practice.
Possibly, there could be.
And I think Romal touched about NPDs, new product development cycles crashing from months and years to weeks. I think that's clearly one area. Partha's talked about, I think, cost controls. We've seen some amazing cost reduction opportunities. For example, advertisements, what used to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, can produce an ad in a few $1,000s now. But my personal favorite, I think, has been the power of the virtual high-touch connect. So personally, what I've found is that I am now able to reach out and connect with hundreds of thousands of our employees at a far greater level than ever before. So at an individual level, I'm talking to a few hundred people in small groups, a few 20, 30 people one-on-one on a weekly basis, and thousands of people through town halls. Along with that, we have idea applications, continuous feedback apps, which are online. So the abilities to be able to remain connected with the people on the ground, to motivate them, encourage them, and get feedback. The entire speed and velocity, I think, has changed in ways you could have never imagined before. And I think this is going to be the new way of working. And I think as leaders, we have to make sure to avoid what I call the quick snap back on. But I do believe that the way for leaders to connect and leverage technology in some ways has changed. That will hopefully allows us to become far more connected and engaged leaders.
So well said. In fact, technology has also become so intuitive. Someone was sharing this with me the other day that, some HR leader, that my senior leadership has suddenly got very comfortable with Zoom. It needed COVID to get them to do things and manage things using Zoom. So this is good. Very well said, Vivek. Partha, what would be your takeaway?
Okay, if you have said everything, then it will leave hardly anything for me to say. Prabir, it's a good one. It's what you said is a good segue. I think the biggest benefit that we have got from COVID is this thing called working from home and alternate thinking. This combination is what is the best practice that I've seen. Just, I'm doing all board meetings, listed company board meetings, I'm doing all of that, which is great, but that's still organizational. But my wife and her music teacher are now conducting classes over therefore the whole community has conspired to make this, difficulty go away by co-creating. So the entire ecosystem has come. Think of anything. I'm now participating a 25th wedding anniversary through, and probably now we are physically distant and socially near. It is not social distancing. It's the other way around which has happened. We're physically far and socially near. So it's almost kind of become. And alternate thinking, just to give 2 or 3 examples, and I'm quoting Mahindra just because I happen to be from there.
Sure.
Think of auto sector developing masks and ventilators.
Correct.
Yeah. Think of agri sector developing sanitation, things. Think of logistic putting an allied, emergency services free every city. So I think they said, oh, how do I make this all come to bear to give a best practice for in that kind of thing? And I think this has gladdened our heart, and it may pivot to new business models that we will see later. But what we have now, that we need to embed that into our ecosystem. We don't need to lose this about the entire alternate thinking and the entire ecosystem coming to create new business models. I think this is once in a lifetime opportunity. We'll be fools if we lose it, as a country, as a community, as a world.
Brilliantly said. Absolutely. Alternate thinking. It needed a crisis to get us really out of our comfort zones and say it was all there. It already existed. It was just that we were not able to see. And you talked about social takeaways. It was very interesting. But I have a lawyer daughter, and she has friends across the world, and they do their now whatever weekly or fortnightly catch up over drinks virtually. I had never imagined that you could actually do a drinks party virtually, but that's how life is changing. Well said. Well said. Romal, can I come to you, and what to you would be your biggest takeaway from this experience?
So I think a lot of that has honestly been articulated by Vivek and Partha, whether it is in terms of the leadership connect, leadership building confidence. Confidence is extremely important in these times, and the trust in terms of your products with your consumers, or whether Partha spoke about it really in terms of viable mechanisms. But very interesting from our perspective as Deloitte, I would have answered the first 2, but I'll take the third one now, was in Deloitte. The biggest opportunity that we see in India and globally are really 2 things, right? In terms of, one is virtualization. How do you help make a business virtual, right? And of course, a here and now problem is, how do you ensure social distancing, right? In all aspects, right? Not just social distancing of keeping away, but how do you resume business? You would be happy to know that this whole solution has been built on a crowdsourcing platform of Deloitte professionals across in a record period of time. So it was not, usually, we have 7-8 people who sit and, think through a solution, but this virtualization has been completely built. This solution has been completely built. And what's the nice part is bringing in sector flavor, bringing in, core manufacturing experience, retail experience, services sector, all of that in a very, very short period of time. So I think what we figured out for our own business, we are known as a solution company, but we realized that we could have done a lot better and a lot earlier than a COVID actually had to make us do. So that's something I would say is a good practice.
Great. So speed is something that very clearly from your examples I'm picking up, that we can do so many things smarter and quicker than we were otherwise doing. So gentlemen, we have about, I think, 15 minutes, and I have a set of questions coming my way. I'm going to merge some, and I'm going to take some representative questions. So one thing that we didn't get time to really talk through yet, but I want any one of you to kind of pick this up. See, the MSME world is a huge part of India's economy, and even as an employer, it is far bigger than many other bigger companies. Now, they are going through unprecedented crisis, whether it is in terms of their cash flows, their willingness and ability to kind of hold out. What would your advice be to the MSME world, about prioritizing their survival tactics? Is there any mantra that you would like to suggest to them, that while the government has announced its packages and stuff like that, what should they be doing which can help them survive? Because on that depends livelihood of many, many people. Any one of you would like to pick this up?
Okay, let me take a quick shot at it,
Yeah,
and
perfect.
others can. But to kind of at this time say I will give advice to MSME is not a right thing. But I'll tell you what my immediate reflective thoughts are. Okay.
Sure.
First and foremost is beg, borrow, and plead, and continue to run at least these. Don't run out of cash and run that business, right? For you, it's a question of survival. So call in all the chips you have, if you have to, but you have to come out the next 2-3 months on the other side. If you don't, then you'll kind of go away. So do that. The second one is there is huge amount of ingenuity that is there with all our MSME. As the president of BCCI, I can quote you innumerable experiences I've had in terms of how these MSMEs have behaved. In fact, if I think I can do anything, is to pivot an MSME being the future of India. Okay, so they have. So the B does B should become an important piece of their thing. Here, A and B both has to be the same individual. If it's just a proprietor running shop, right? But if we can kind of do these two, use this jugaad to get the next innovation going and survive this onslaught. This is what I would say. I don't have a better way. Use everything that government throws at you. Help, take everything. Samdam Dandve.
And
Okay.
I agree with Partha, and this is an important time to call in favors from your bigger customers. So, for instance, in many cases, we've been giving advance payments to some of our critical suppliers, right? At the same time, for some of our distributors, we are giving their sales reps allowances, health kits. We are providing COVID insurance to our partners. So I think we are recognizing also as larger companies that we need some of our MSME partners, and it's important for them to thrive. So I think MSMEs should also figure out who their most important customers are, pick up the phone and try and see. It may not work, but try and call in the favors as Partha was suggesting.
So this is not the time to sit back and blame or to wait for someone to throw them a lifeline. Companies are willing to be open because they know the symbiosis between their future and the role of the MSMEs. I have a very interesting question. Romal, I don't know whether you had a thought on MSMEs, because otherwise I'll switch to another question.
No, please go ahead. I think Vivek.
So maybe then I'm going to put you on the spot and see whether you have a suggestion. So someone's question is, now Wimbledon, for example, used to have a massive multi-million-dollar, insurance and stuff like that. Now this year, the Olympics are gone, Wimbledon is gone. I don't know what all sports events are on. What is your sense about, future proofing of such big events going forward? Will the world of insurance change? Will the world of enterprise risk thinking change? Is there really a monetary value that you will put behind it? Who would be in a position to kind of take up an insurance or a reinsurance claim? So how do you see this entire case of insuring the future? Is there really a future proofing possible?
No, so I think future proofing is basically means you're 100%. You can get away, but I don't think so. Anybody in their right mind can say that you can get away. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. But things like insurance, things like managing risks far better, having alternatives, viables, that will become more essential in every day's life of business. See, the culture that I see is not about a set of individuals having that risk culture. And when I say risk is not only about bad things, risk is also about opportunities, but the whole organization changing and having that mindset. So obviously insurance and other companies, it is an opportunity for them, because people will start looking at things, because even in this virus, you don't know whether the relapse is going to happen, right? When is it going to happen? So how long can you close borders? You will open up borders. What happens to what Mr. Trump does in the US? is not only about China. It has broad-based implications across the world, right? If they stop preventing people from coming into any other country, that has implications. So looking at all those scenarios, including insurance, obviously is clearly something that everybody should look at, and everybody should figure out a way that, but I don't know if there is an amount, but you have now models and everything else. You can only best guesstimate. That's what I would say.
Praveer, can I add something
Of
here?
course, Partha, of course.
Yeah, this is a fantastic question, and the segue should not be to answer about Wimbledon, but to kind of broad base it and say that if you have events which makes or breaks you, how do you look at safeguarding yourself? For example, let's say your debt equity. Based on your business, should you think about debt equity? Your margin of safety. Is it important to look at your margin of safety, and what will you do? Is it important now to think about ROC? I'm only giving financial ratio. You could go into other ratios as well, but it's very, very important question for people to, segue and think about what is important. And therefore, your Wimbledon, that insurance was very important, and they took it. Right decision. It is not necessary for everybody else to, somebody can do self-insurance also. But the key thing is, are you recognizing what is the consequence, and therefore are able to, trade risk reward? If you have a 2:1 debt ratio and right now you don't get any cash, you will be dead before you know it, right? Leverage was a great thing once. Now
Absolutely.
Cash is, so
absolutely. Perfect. Brilliant. Vivek, a question that, I'd like you to share your thoughts on. How does through all this crisis, things like corporate reputation, brands, how will they get impacted? Will it be product? Will it be service? Will it be stories, reputation, philanthropy? How do you see this world of corporate reputation and brand pan out through this crisis that is unfolding?
I think, at this particular stage, Prabir, consumers will look for more trust, and they will look for safety, because the world is so much more confusing right now, so much more anxious right now. So I think consumers will gravitate towards, companies or brands or products that give them a much more higher level of assurance as possible. So even at the product line, I'll give you an example. I think efficacy will become far more important than pure emotion. So till a few months ago, people didn't even know what a sanitizer was. And then suddenly you began seeing a huge spike in sale of sanitizers. Then consumers began asking, ye alcohol wala hai ki nahi hai? Right? Then they began saying, isme 60% alcohol hai ki nahi? So the first thing consumers are looking for right now is actually, is this product giving me the intended benefits? With the power of digital communities, as Romal and Partha was saying, you will start seeing far more expectations on consumers to be able to reinforce trust. I think companies which are trustworthy, companies which stand for strong values, are the ones which will gain disproportionately. And through all of this, I think corporate reputation will become far more important than ever before. Sustainability will take a new meaning. It will no longer be about CSR. It will no longer be just about plastics and environment. It will be about social sustainability, economic sustainability. What role do we play? How we work with the government? There are going to be some fundamental changes in the role and expectations of any company in this environment.
So well said. In fact, I'm not going to ask you another question because you've somewhere answered this, but someone has sent a question saying, as a CEO, what would be the priority? People or profits, culture or cost? But if you want to, you can comment further.
It all starts with the people. Without people, you can't make profits. Culture exists because of people. You don't have culture without people. So from our perspective, it all begins and ends with people, I think.
That's right. Perfect. Romal, there's a question for you on the future of management consulting. Someone wants to get your advice. That is it going to be still a very expensive, exclusive service which big clients can afford and therefore come to? Would it be a discretionary spend, or do you see that it will actually become a more responsible consulting and a future for younger professionals still to look at?
Sure, great question. So, okay, anyway, what I do think, consulting is probably going to become more outcome-based more result oriented. I think that is what, and the ability to make things happen, partner with companies to actually deliver, is probably going to become more important than maybe traditional management consulting sometimes, which were largely intangible. So I think that's how the change would happen. But like I said, even our own environment has changed dramatically, in terms of how we are delivering at clients. But that's a big shift probably compared to the past.
But it will continue to be a very exciting career for
so see, management concern. I got into this profession because I loved solving a puzzle, right? I love solving a problem. If you like solving issues and you want to solve every day a different puzzle, then management consulting is probably the most interesting. And every CEO, every board member has that innate ability in them to solve. That's why they are at that position. We just want to strive to get there. So it'll always be something which will be absolutely exciting. 100%.
Super. So there's someone who's actually asked the moderator a question. So I'll just read that out and give a very short response, and maybe Partha, one final question before I then hand over to back to the organizers. So this question is about really the landscape of the workforce. What could change? And while all of you will have your perspectives, my own read is companies would do well to revisit the entire mix of their workforce, not only in terms of skill sets and structure and stuff like that, but even the demographics. I personally feel that the gig reality is going to get stronger because it is a win-win for both people who bring a certain value but yet do not want to be captive to an organization. Organizations also may not necessarily be in a position of having full-time employees of the numbers that they've had. I think the entire workforce composition, demographics, everything is up for question. But what will remain very, very important will be the role of managers and leaders who can actually connect the various dots, and including the various kind of streams of workforce demographics. This question, Partha, is, and I think that will be the last question we'll have time for. The question is that there's a lot of talk in the press about India turning out to be a great opportunity as a geography compared to certain possible migrations from some other countries. What is your take? Do you think it is a wish, or do you think it's actually an opportunity for India only to lose?
I think you put it rightly. It's an opportunity that is staring on our face, and we will do well to grab it with both hands. If we lose it, it is because of us, not because of anything else. So I think there is huge opportunity.
So you would be very bullish that we should not look and say that 2020 was a turning point in the history of India, but India refused to turn.
No, I just say I've got great faith in the team here also, and the recovery. So
okay, excellent. Well said.
So Praveen, maybe I'll just add just a line.
Yeah,
I think it is a great opportunity for India, but we should be very clear about what we want to pursue, not try to be everything for everybody. I think if we can do that clearly, and sometimes people joke saying that, not jokes, sorry, they're serious, that we'll go to Vietnam. But India has a domestic market and can also have an export market. I think that's a very critical element for any business to look at. So we should be focused where we want to operate and where we want to go behind something. Perfect. Focus. Vivek, would you have a comment?
No, I completely echo what Partha and Romal are saying. I think it's a huge part of slogans. And slogans are very, very powerful to energize people. I think our challenge always has been implementation on the ground and action on the ground. The quicker we can translate grand, lofty ambitions to actually making things happen, the potential is all there. What always holds us back is the slip between ambition and actual implementation, I think.
Excellent. This is great. So thank you, gentlemen, for coming and sharing your thoughts. My apologies for a bit of a tech hiccup. So Vivek, I missed a lot of what you said in your first question, but you made up with a lot of very, very useful suggestions, not only for us to listen in, but to so many of our panelists who have been on the call. And I think with that, I would think that we'll hand it back to Deepak. Would you like to kind of have some kind of a closing comment?
Yeah, thanks, Prabir and Partha, Vivek, Romal. It was an awesome and a very engaging conversation. And Prabir, I must say that it's not easy to moderate a webinar, but you did a great job by having the three great speakers and thought leaders, and you balanced the conversation beautifully. And I believe that you should sum the conversation by a small few lines from your kavita that you actually write so intensely. So you must do that.
Okay, so I will try and read out something that I wrote. It's in Hindi, and maybe with the lockdown and also this possibility for India. So let me see how it goes. So I had written these lines. I call it वह दर्द नहीं, वह दस्तक है. उस अंधेरे सन्नाटे में क्या वह एक छोटी आहट है? उस अंधेरे सन्नाटे में क्या वह एक छोटी आहट है? कोई शायद आया है. Has someone come? Is someone knocking? उस उम्मीद का एक पुराने टूटे हुए सपने का. उस उम्मीद का एक पुराने टूटे हुए सपने का. वह दर्द नहीं, वह दस्तक है. So it's a knock. Opportunity is knocking. अकेलापन कभी कभी अकेले से भी होती है. Talk of lockdown. अकेलापन कभी कभी अकेले से भी होती है. ख्वाबों से तो वह केवल कम ही होती है. दिल तो निराशों में आस्था खोजती है. दिल तो निराशों में आशा खोजती है. लेकिन रेतों पर क्या बागान उगता है? This is the question about if we don't do it, then what happens? लेकिन रेतों पर क्या बागान उगता है? वह दर्द नहीं, वह दस्तक. And the last lines, समय से खराब कोई नहीं, समय से खराब कोई नहीं, और उससे अच्छा भी शायद कोई नहीं. Bad times, but also possibly best times. अंधेरे सी जिंदगी में एक बाती भी झिलमिलाती है. अंधेरे से जिंदगी में एक बाती भी झिलमिलाती है. पूछो उन्हें जिन्होंने युग युग जिए सिर्फ अंधेरे में. पूछो उन्हें जिन्होंने युग युग जिए सिर्फ अंधेरे में. एक बाती पर ही सही बाकी जिंदगी कट जाए आशाओं में. वह दर्द नहीं, वह दस्तक है. So to me, it's a moment of great opportunity. It's the silver lining. It's not just a crisis, and that's how I penned some of these lines, yesterday or day before.
Beautiful, Prabir. That was awesome. And I also remember something what Warren Buffett keeps saying. He says, "Be fearful when others are greedy, and greedy when others are fearful." And so probably this is the time to be greedy, be proactive, be future-proof, ready for the business, and so on. And a lot of our members been asking, what is CEO Lounge doing these days? So just a bit of a selling out here. So we are taking time to build our brand. We are creating very informative content and writing blogs and articles, creating videos and podcasts that are relevant to our audience. Our audience and members wants to be productive, so we're holding a lot of webinars, chit chat sessions, and keeping engagement on with the audience during this downtime. And while we are all feeling the anxiety brought about by COVID-19 and the economic difficulties, it is essential not to become disheartened. Take proactive steps to all protect ourselves, loved ones, and business. Thank you to all the 350 plus audience who joined in today, and I welcome you all to join the next Saturday for another high intensity conversation on the topic of change in the consumer behavior. And before I say the final namaskar, goodbye, I'm going to request Partha to sum this entire conversation with a small shairi and a goodbye to everybody.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's not going to happen. But let me quickly kind of say a couple of things from public library. The first one is what I wrote, which I feel very now close to. Aaya hu badi dur se, खाता हूँ करेला, मूंछों पे ताऊ दे के लड़ता हूँ अकेला. So sitting at home, that's how I feel. Okay, but the one which is more appropriate to this kind of thing is अनगिनत राही गए इस पथ से, पर कुछ गए छोड़ पैरों की निशानी. यह निशानी मूक होकर भी बहुत कुछ बोलती है. खोल इसका अर्थ पंथी पंथ का विधान कर ले. पूर्व चलने के बटोही बाट की पहचान कर ले. So understand the path that you're going to travel in the crisis, and you will win when you come out of it.
Thank you, everyone. Namaskar.
Thank you very much.
Stay
Bye-bye.
healthy. Thank you. Thank you.